Hello, my name is Keith, aka LoLByTheNumbers, and welcome to another 2014 League of Legends World Championship video analysis. Once again, this is a video analysis, not a shoutcast, so there will be plenty of spoilers, and most of the time I will be looking at overall strategy rather than the game itself. I'll be focusing primarily on macro level strategy, looking very specifically at team compositions, their win conditions, how teams do, don't, and should be pulling off these conditions in the game to win. I'll also be looking at map rotations, objective control, individual matchups when appropriate, item choices, and the occasional individual play when it's paramount to the win or loss of a team. For this game, we have Najin White Shield against Kabum Esports. This is their first game in the group stages, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get into picks and bans. On Najin White Shield's side, we see Jinx being banned as Minerva really loves this champion, plays it almost all the time. So it's just a targeted ban. Maokai Zilean are being banned out. We know that Najin White Shield don't like to play Zilean, and they don't want to give the first pick Maokai over to Kabum. On Kabum's side, we see Alistar being banned along with Lee Sin and Twitch. Lee Sin, Alistar being fairly generic bans, Twitch being targeted at Zephyr. On Najin White Shield side, we see Zed being first picked. Zed is a strong champion in the start of Worlds. Throughout the group stages, he's played a lot. He works very well against these wildcard teams, as he's very high mechanical skill. He's all about the outplay. He falls off a little bit when it comes to team compositions. He really only has one thing he can do well, and that is split push. So when you play Zed, you either get ahead or you become almost useless. On Kabum's side, we see them picking up Kayle and Lucian. Kayle being taken as the top lane choice works well against Lucian's Deathmark. As a champion that Lep likes to play. I would have preferred to have seen the Rise pick up. He's a stronger champion, he is on the board. This would also deny save, force him back onto something we don't normally see him playing. Maybe we would have seen an Aurelia or a Lulu. They do have some tricky plays with playing Kassadin top. So there are options. For second round picks, we see Kha'Zix and Thresh being picked up. These are very solid picks by Najin White Shield. I like the fact that they take Kha'Zix, pulls him out of the jungle since Lee Sin is banned. Also feel like Kabum could have picked up this Kha'Zix in their first round draft, but it's not so much one of Danagorn's champions. We see him on a lot of Elise throughout the group stages. Thresh as well is just a very strong champion, very solid. It's a great pickup. Then we move over to Kabum's side. We see Ahri and Elise being picked up together. Now I really like this combination. I think Elise and Ahri go great together. Having the ability to chain those long-range CCs and Charm and Cocoon, as well as go fishing for them under turrets in the jungle at dragons. They can look to hit these things together, and if they can chain them well, you're probably going to see a dead champion, especially with the upfront damage of Elise and the burst of Ahri. One thing I do prefer, though, is to see more CC than what comes out. Janna does have CC with her Tornado, but it does take a bit of a setup. Not necessarily, it's really hard to go fishing for, as it's a bit predictable. So instead of this next Janna pickup that comes from Kabum, I'd really rather see Thresh, but he's already taken, or Nami, Morgana. Even Leona Braum would work well in Kabum's team composition, and I'll get into that later. But anytime you pick Elise, I feel you have to either be running fast push 2v1 lanes and go for the turret trades really quickly, or you need to have a catch composition in which you're throwing out multiple long range CCs. You need at least 3, 4 is preferable. And in this case, Kabum are only running with 2. On Najin White Shield's side, we see Corki and Rise as the final pickups. Rise, being an overall strong champion, does have a little bit of a dip in power during the mid game when he's generating his mana, but it's one of the smaller power dips in the game. While he can still offer solid support to his team through the snare, as well as still doing good damage, he's just fairly squishy at that point. Corki is a great pickup. I don't know why we don't see him more often in the group stages, especially in the first rounds of the group stages. Najin White Shield opting more for Tristana in later matches gets them into trouble, specifically against Alliance. In this match, though, Corki is a great pickup. It shores up a big weakness of Najin White Shield's team, which is wave clear. Zed doesn't really provide the greatest wave clear, and you really want him off split pushing, so he's not likely going to be with your team. Corki, however, provides amazing wave clear. His ultimate rockets and his Q can clear a wave in 2 to 3 shots. If you add in Kha'Zix and his evolved spike rack, all of a sudden you can defend a turret with 2 people. You just have to be prepared for the dive. So I really like this final pickup of Corki. Completely shores up Najin White Shield's team's weakness, and also allows the Rise to play the split pusher as well if they so choose. So with that, let's get into team compositions, and we'll talk first about Najin White Shield. Najin White Shield have crafted a split push heavy composition, and they have the option of running a 1-3-1 or a 1-4. Rise or Zed, depending on who's doing better in the match and depending upon the defenses that Kabum build, can decide which one of them are going for the split push. Generally, you want to always have Zed split pushing, so if you're going to let Rise split push, it's more likely that Najin White Shield will be running a 1-1-3 or a 1-3-1. This works very well because Rise and Zed versus Ahri is a very skill-based matchup. If Zed is able to get ahead, then he's going to be the better split pusher and can take over a side lane. Same thing goes for Rise. It's a fairly even matchup. Rise will fall off a little bit as soon as Kale is able to pick up his second half item. So Kale will build Nashor's Tooth, and then he's going to be on even footing with Rise. It's going to take until Kale either picks up Recurve Bow or Needlessly Large Rod, depending on whether or not he wants to go Death Cap or Runaan's Hurricane. In this case, I'd probably end up going Death Cap or Lichbane, as you're more than likely going to be looking at small skirmish fights rather than the big 5v5 team fight. But either choice is acceptable. Even if you wanted to go Lichbane instead of Death Cap, that works. But my point being is that Rise is going to be fairly safe. He's not going to hit that weak point until Kale gets those items, and that's only going to be until Rise can scale up his Rod of Ages and then pick up either a defensive item or finish his Saracen Brace, depending on what he's feeling like. At that point, Rise will once again take the lead, especially if he's able to generate a lead early on in the game. He'll get that Rod of Ages quicker and shore up that weak point, allowing him to split push very solidly against Kale. What this also means is the trio of Najin White Shield, Kha'Zix, Corki, Thresh, is going to be stronger, very strong at defense. As stated a little bit earlier, Kha'Zix evolved Spike Rack plus Corki, Q, and Ultimate. Very strong at wave clear, very strong at poke. If Najin White Shield are able to run the 1-3-1, drawing Kale and Ahri away, then you've taken out a good, solid strategy of Najin White Shield, which is engage using Kale Ultimate for defense, and to sort of make a pseudo front line with it, and to look for catches with Elise Ahri combination. By taking out both or even one of these elements, you severely limit Kabum's strategic potential, while increasing your own by playing the better strategy of your split pushers. So this is Najin White Shield's win condition. Run the 1-3-1, run the 1-4, and let the rest of your team take middle and just defend or push. Corki, Kha'Zix, and Thresh can even look to play aggressive in the mid lane as the trio. With the greater poke of Thresh and Corki, they can probably push back Elise, Lucian, Janna, and then get a couple hits onto turret. So they're in the advantage in every situation of a split push. It's even possible for Najin White Shield to be able to run a 1-1-1-2, leaving Corki on his own to simply wave clear. Just play the turret defense, make sure there's no dives coming in. With a couple good wards, Corki should be able to sit against Janna Lucian by himself and just be defensive, throw out his rockets. Keep up a turret from range, and the safety of turret protection. So this is a possibility for Najin White Shield. It's more than likely only going to happen if they're very ahead. But this would let Thresh and Kha'Zix roam, looking to take turrets in the side lanes, looking to find picks in the jungle. So essentially you would have a 3-lane push, or 2-lane push, 1-lane defense, with 2 roaming champions. Very scary. So this is Najin White Shield's win condition. Go even or ahead in lanes. When you reach a solid point for split pushing, start it. Don't hesitate. Split up into the 1-4 or the 1-3-1. And continue to run that throughout the game. Even if Najin White Shield are behind, if one of their split pushers is ahead, this gives them this option. So Najin White Shield really just need to focus one lane to get it rolling. Once they get that lane rolling, it opens up all the options for them. On Kabum's side, they haven't necessarily crafted a very solid team composition. This is more along the lines of comfortable lanes. This being their, them being the wildcard team. This being one of their few major LAN tournaments, as well as the biggest thing they've ever been to. They're looking to go into their first couple matches comfortably. And these are all comfort champions. The problem is they don't work well together. The best synergy we have in this match is Elise Ahri, in their ability to throw out cocoons, to throw out charms, and to look for catches, to look to turn that into a quick kill, a quick pick. The problem being, it's not necessarily enough time, especially if you're looking to hit somebody under turret or at the dragon area. Most kills Ahri gets are when she's ahead and she's looking for the assassinate, not the catch, where she dives in with her ultimate, gets the charm, gets all the follow-up damage, especially when she picks up Deathfire's Grasp, and then dashes out. Whereas when you're trying to catch somebody, you're throwing out your charm, you're not bothering to use your ultimate, you're saving your ultimate for when the team fight happens. So if a cocoon lands, you hit your charm, you get all your damage, you back off. You don't ever fully commit to it. And this works best when you have 3 forms of CC. As we see from Kabum in their second game against Alliance, we see them running this similar composition. Elise Ahri, we see Morgana instead being picked up, and a Rise up top. Don't need both of these, but together they both work really well, especially against Alliance's team. But if you have Morgana in the bot lane, then this gives you 3 long-range CCs with very long durations total. A good 2 seconds plus snare, and then I think around 3 seconds total between charm and cocoon. So if you can chain these well, you take somebody out of the fight for a good 6-7 seconds. Very powerful, and it also allows you, because there's more long-range damage in the power of Morgana snare, on top of the fact that she likes to max it. It gives you better potential in this catch fishing sort of scenario without having to fully engage. So that's part of the problem with Kabum's team right now, is they only have Ahri and Elise, and it's not quite enough. It's almost there, but it still needs a little bit more, especially since Lucian and Kayle are short range, there's not going to be a lot of follow-up burst to the charm or to the cocoon without Najin White Shield feeling like they need to go in against Kabum's team. On top of this, the second counterpoint to their team is they're not really running a frontline team that can sow chaos. If Janna had been, say, a Leona or a Braum, this would have given Kabum a bit more tankiness. They could have looked for more of an engagement composition. Elise could have built pure tank, gone and leapt in. Leona Braum follows her. Then you have Ahri dashing in, potentially with maybe a semi-tanky build, picking up Abyssal Scepter. She gets the ultimate from Kayle. This makes her tanky in the front line, and so you have this sort of pseudo 3-man tank line that sows chaos into the enemy team, while Kayle and Lucian deal out the damage from behind. So this is another potential composition that Kabum could have made with one more change. As it stands, they're just looking at comfort champions without any real complete synergy. They have the two half synergies mentioned. Elise and Ahri can go in with one of them getting the Kayle ultimate and try and soak up some damage. Elise and Ahri can also look for these picks. But outside of that, Kabum are simply going to have to win lane. If they want to win this game, they need to get ahead. They need to generate a lead, and then they can use the mid-game power of Ahri and Lucian to start bullying at Dragon and try and take it that way, especially when Ryze hits his monoscaling phase, and as soon as Kayle is able to pick up his Nashor's Tooth, probably be the best chance that Kabum would have if they could win their lanes or get ahead. They'd have to be very wary of Corki and his Trinity Force, as that's a very similar power spike to Lucian, and is actually slightly stronger. A little bit stronger than Lucian, as it's more guaranteed damage. If Lucian is able to get a crit with the Infinity Edge that you pick up, then Lucian can be better in that fight. On the same side, Corki provides the poke, so it makes it really difficult for Kabum to fight on even footing if they're running even gold. And that's the team compositions, that's their win condition. Kabum has to win lane, has to build a lead, and then snowball it. They have the ability to snowball the lead through their champions. They have pretty solid mid-game power in Ahri and Lucian, as said before. Kayle can run into the late game. Elise has great early ganks. But it's terribly difficult to make your strategy win game, win lane. This means you're going into a match without any team synergy, without an actual composition. You're completely relying on the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game to carry you through the next potential 30. And this is no way to craft a team. You should much rather craft a team that you can make it through the first 5 to 10 minutes for, and then will carry you through the next 30 to 40. And this is the situation that we find Kabum in. Not only are they weak in team composition, they're weaker in individual skill, and we all have generally accepted that, Kabum being the wildcard team. So that means even more that Kabum need to craft a solid team composition. And as we'll see in Kabum versus Alliance, their second match, Kabum craft a beautiful team composition, especially against the one Alliance makes. And even being the weaker team on individual skill, they play their team composition beautifully and come out with the win against Alliance, the number 1 team from Europe. That is a great game to watch, to understand the power of team compositions and of playing them properly and map strategy. So at this point, I don't want to necessarily say that Kabum have lost the match, but now it's Najin White Shield's game to throw. They are running a 4k gold lead. They have got solo kills in the mid lane. Rise up top has a good 30 CS lead. These are the two lanes that Najin White Shield needed to do well, and they are doing well. Corki on top of this has been doing phenomenally with Thresh, and so he's going to make it into the point where he can be the defensive member of Najin White Shield, protecting the mid lane if Najin White Shield want to move into these 1-3-1s. It's actually entirely possible for them to do this right now. Corki and Thresh could head middle to fight Ahri, and Zed could go bottom to push in the turret. It's not necessary, they can just sit in their lanes until the first outer turrets go down, but they could start running it right away if they really wanted to. As it stands, we were talking about running the 1-1-2 or 1-1-1-2, and Najin White Shield have done this, and they've been doing this for the past couple 3-4 minutes, maybe a little bit less. And we see Corki is running in the 2v1. It's because he's not really under any threat from Kabum's duo lane. The worst thing that could happen to him is he gets hit by Gianna knockup and then slowed. Lucian would have to throw himself fully at this Corki and chase him down the lane to kill him. But as we see, simply because Lucian has this awkward build, he doesn't have BF Sword, and he's not playing properly entirely with Janna. They're a little bit just disjointed. We see if Janna had hit that earlier, or if Lucian had kept going, they potentially could have got the kill. But the big thing is that Corki's escape is much longer than the distance Kabum can cover with Janna and Lucian. So if Corki's ever feeling truly threatened in that bottom lane, he can Valkyrie away and be out of range and safe. Even from safe play, he can just simply use his rockets and his Q to clear out the creep waves, keeping up his CS and keeping his turret alive. This is what lets Thresh roam rampant. Put a ton of pressure up onto the top lane, into the jungle of Kabum. And since Ahri can't leave, Corki is also safe on this bot lane. And we do see that Corki has taken the bottom turret by himself in a 2v1 scenario. It just speaks to the individual skill as well as just the lane matchup and how safe Corki is in it. If there had been, say, a Morgana or even a Nami on Kabum's side instead of this Janna or Leona, Braum, whatever, they would have had some CC, some hard CC. They would have had a way to get onto Corki and would have provided more of a threat against him in the 2v1. So that's essentially the game. Najin White Shield are going to run around. The game's going to look very solo queue-esque. There's not much else to say. The 7-1 lead, a good 7,000 gold already in 17 minutes. We've seen how well Corki is handling the 2v1. We see this massive roam coming in from Thresh and Kha'Zix going all over the map. We see giant CS leads showing up. Everything is in Najin White Shield's favor. And so they can just keep up these lane pushes like this in the 1-3-1, the 1-1-1-2, 1-4. Look to take turrets. They just have all the power they need, and Kabum's team doesn't have a strategy for coming back into this game. There's not many options they have, and I'd almost say they have none. They could go for something really risky and send 4 people, 5 people into the jungle to look for a pick with Elise and Ahri, and with Lucian providing the last bit of damage. Maybe they can find one person out. They almost got it on Zed. Or perhaps they could just abandon the middle lane and send all 5 people top to kill Rise and then move into the top turret. It would and it should sacrifice their middle lane all the way up into the inhibitor, but maybe they could base race and take two side turrets for the mid inhibitor, and then they would get some towers, they would get some global gold. Yes, they would trade all the pressure, but maybe Najin White Shield would react improperly. Maybe they freak out, try to go top, so then Kabum take the top tier 1, back off and retreat. Then they could try it again bottom. Who knows how Najin White Shield are going to react. The proper reaction would be just to be trade the turrets for the inhibitor, then you get full pressure on Baron. But in this situation, when you are the team this far behind, when it's 10,000 gold at 20 minutes, when you don't have scaling to rely on, when you don't have a team composition to rely on, you have to make some crazy moves. Better to make a crazy move and end the game faster rather than let yourself die a slow death. Having said that, I'll just let the game play out, and I'll start to talk about lane compositions, or lane matchups rather. We'll start with Zed vs Ahri, as this is the one where we've seen the most solo kills. Zed is playing very well, and this matchup is entirely skill based. It's very dependent on how well Ahri can land her charm, specifically after Zed uses his ultimate. And she's also got to be very risky, very intelligent about how she uses her charms. If she ever throws out a charm in the wrong scenario and doesn't hit it, Zed now has the potential to all-in Ahri, and he will kill her. If Ahri throws out her charm when Zed is too close, Zed simply uses his ultimate onto Ahri to dodge out the charm, as well as get himself onto Ahri to kill her. What Ahri needs to do at the level 6 point is hold on to her charm unless she feels guaranteed to hit it, and then when Zed uses his ultimate onto her, she needs to have the proper timing to hit Zed when he reappears. This will give Ahri a lot of trade damage, as well as protect her from taking a ton of damage from the death mark. So Zed goes in, Ahri throws out her charm at the right moment, Zed gets charmed, Ahri dashes away, throws out her skills, dashes away again. She's very safe, and at this point, depending on how much damage she's done, depending on situations with Zed, she can now use her third dash to move into the fight if she feels that she can kill Zed. Outside of this level 6 interaction, at levels 1 through 5, Ahri does have a little bit of advantage. They both have solid poke in Orb of Deception, and in Zed's Shuriken, I don't remember the name, but his Q. And so they can try and hit each other while wave clearing, getting their damage through the minions. Once the full combos come in at level 3, Ahri can try and hit a charm. If she can hit a charm onto Zed during the lane phase, she can start to take control of the lane. One good charm can equal about half Zed's HP. She still has to be careful though, as a missed charm can result in Zed using his living shadow to get next to Ahri, follow up with lots of damage. Just go all in against her, get the auto attacks. His Q is E. He can provide a lot more trade damage than Ahri can if Ahri's charm is down. So that is the mid lane matchup and what both sides can do in it. If one ever gets ahead, it becomes really very dangerous for the other, simply because they have the damage and assassination potential to guarantee the kill, whereas their lane opponent cannot guarantee their own. So all kill potential when one person gets ahead goes onto the other side, forcing their lane opponent to play defensive, and this puts all the power into Zed or Ahri, whichever one is ahead. In the bottom lane, the Thresh Corki versus Lucian Janna matchup. Now this is an interesting one because both sides have some pretty solid power, and the interaction really comes down to how you use Janna's shield or deal with it. Janna's shield is very bad defensively in the early game. It blocks plenty of damage, that's not what I'm trying to say, but if you're using Janna's shield defensively in the early game, then you are losing out on the AD ratio buff. As soon as Janna's shield is down, your ADC will lose that extra damage. So this means in the early game you really want to use Janna's shield proactively. You should be throwing it onto Lucian. When Lucian is about to land his Q, Lucian goes in against Corki, uses his Q, gets his double proc with Janna passive on. When Corki tries to retaliate, Janna's shield will be broken, but you'll have already gotten off the extra AD damage on Lucian's Q and on his double shot passive. This is essential for you to take control of the lane. Essential for any ADC playing with Janna or any support who's playing Janna. You have to use it proactively, not reactively. If you're ever using Janna's shield, as we saw in this match, to block Corki's Q, you've lost the trade already. Corki's Q is going to break Janna's shield, and then Corki is probably going to get an auto attack in. What this means is Corki has essentially negated Janna from the fight, and Thresh is allowed to take over. Thresh will go in towards Janna or Lucian, get his flay, get his auto attacks, and now you have more damage coming from Najin White's shield side than you have coming from Kabum's side. So rather than think of Janna's shield as a defensive tool, you really need to think of it as an offensive tool. And that's how you decide who ends up winning this bottom lane matchup in the early games, especially at level 1. Depending on if Corki hits his Q, if you get hit by Thresh Flay, how well Lucian is able to use his Q and his auto attack double shot against Corki, will really determine who comes out ahead at level 1 and moves into level 2 first. As the lanes progress, it gets a little bit more difficult for both sides, really. Lucian Janna have to be a little bit more careful. If Thresh lands a hook, this is very deadly. Janna needs to react with her tornado very quickly to knock Thresh out of his hook dash so that he cannot get the flay afterwards. If she's the one hooked, it's probably Lucian needs to then look to target Corki to prevent him from getting a lot of damage onto Janna. And also, if you're going to trade damage, it's generally better to trade it your ADC being safe and your support taking the hits. The supports are running more sustain items or potentially more sustain runes and masteries. Sorry. But as the levels progress, there's an interesting interaction. It's all about Thresh at that point. If Thresh can hit a hook or a flay, Kabum's side is in trouble. Otherwise, Lucian is able to get a Janna shield, walk towards Corki, use his Q on Corki, get the double shot passive, use his W, get the double shot passive, and then when Thresh tries to hook Lucian, Lucian simply dashes out of it. So this puts a lot of pressure onto Thresh to properly use his flay, to properly use his hooks, but it also means that Janna and Lucian have to be the ones playing aggressive. They're the ones who have to be looking to put the hurt down onto Corki. At level 6, things become much more difficult for Lucian Janna as Corki gains humongous amounts of poke, and at this point the lane is kind of going to be lost if you're on even footing. The best thing Lucian Janna can do is to go for an all-in. Lucian running at Corki, throwing out all his damage. When Corki Valkyries away, Lucian moves into his ultimate and try and take Corki down to a third. A half HP, hopefully a third or a quarter, maybe even kill him. And now Corki's stuck on the back foot in the lane at level 6. But you kind of have to do this right away once you get to lane. So that's the bottom lane matchup. Anyways, that's the game. It was rather a quick one. There was a few things to say about team compositions. Najin White Shield crafted a good one. Kabum didn't really have anything to fall back onto. They had to win their lanes, and they didn't. When you know you're the weaker team, you really should start to put more thought and reliance onto your team composition. Rely on your team play and your strategy to make it through, rather than thinking you're going to win the 1v1 matchups. So that's our game. I hope it was informative. I know it was quick and short, as well as the game not necessarily being too much to take from it, but I hope you did get something out of it. Once again, the notes for this match can be found below, as well as the link to all of my 2014 League of Legends World Championship video analysis and notes. I'm Keith, aka LoLByTheNumbers, and thanks for watching.